Good evening, Bahrain. I'm Bernadette from Gulf Brands International, and this is episode 11 of Wine Online Wednesday. And tonight we are getting to know Grenache. So, Grenache is a black grape. Origins are in the European area. Now, we usually talk about most of the classic wines coming from France. That's where their spiritual home is, at least. But Grenache is a little different. Garnacha is Grenache from Spain. So it goes that it actually originated in Spain in the time of the Aragon kingdom. So the knights of the Aragon dynasty went galloping all around the Mediterranean and took the Garnacha grape with them. So in France it became Grenache. They also went to the island of Sardinia, and there you'll find it today as Cannonau de Sardinia. It's the same grape, just another name for it. Some stories say that it actually originated in Sardinia and then went over to Spain, but I think we'll stick with the Aragon. There's also a variety of grape found in the south of Spain called Tinto Aragonese. Tinto means red in Spanish, and Aragonese, of the Aragons. So I think we know where the wine came from. It's the right story. So tonight we've got two French wines and we've got an Australian. Now the thing about the Grenache grape, it is only in a few wines as 100% Grenache. This is a grape that really likes to mix with its friends, usually Shiraz, Cinsault, and other grapes from the south of France. You will find it 100% in some big powerful wines from the Rhone, principally Châteauneuf-du-Pape and a few of those other big wines. So we're going to start with a rosé, which is interesting. So we've had Shiraz rosé before from the south of France, and so now this is going to be Grenache rosé. So this wine has got about 60% Grenache. The area that it's from doesn't allow more than 60% of any one grape, so it has to come into a bit of a mix. So this is from the Tavel area in the south of France. It's the only AOC, Appellation Origine Contrôlée, in France, which is only for rosé wine. You cannot find Tavel red or white, only rosé. So, and this happened in about 1935 to 1936. So relatively recently in the history of wine. The company itself, the winery, is Brotte, very well known in the region, and especially for big full-bodied red and white wines from the south of France, from the Rhone Valley. So the winery goes back to 1931, and it's now on the 5th generation of winemakers in the family. So they're pretty committed. They're very famous for aging their Grenache for red wines in 100-year-old barrels. But we're concerned with the Tavel rosé today. So the Tavel area is very small. It only exports about 25% of its wines. So you don't often find it outside of France. So it's quite nice to pick up a bottle when you do find it. The Grenache here dates back to, my goodness, in Tavel, they have discovered wine was being made there in the 5th century BC, the Greeks originally. Then the Romans came along, as usual, and changed all the winemaking there. And you will still find out in vineyards today, although they've managed to collect most of them, little broken pieces of pottery, of amphore, which is like a pottery vase with depictions of grapes on the side, and the assumption is that those vases were used for carrying and storing wine. Tavel is also near the town of Avignon, and one of the big supporters of the Tavel rosé was Pope Innocent VI. Not so innocent after all, because he did rather enjoy his little tipple of Tavel. Try saying that after a few. The name itself comes from Villa Tavelis from the 13th century, and ever since then, Tavel remains the name of the area. So, enough history, let's see how it is. So, now the colour is quite deep. It's not like a Provence style very pale rosé. It's very clear, it glimmers, I think is the best way to describe this. Nice pale edges, but very, very dark. Let's see how it is on the nose. Ooh, summer fruits, which definitely is a sign of the Grenache. But they're tart. They're like wild strawberries. You know, when you find the little tiny ones, and they've got, they're very sharp. They're sweet, fruity, but sharp. They're not like farmed big red juicy strawberries that are just overripe. So it's a bit like those kind of little wild strawberries. Okay, so let's have a taste. Summer fruits are coming through, and again it's a little bit tart. It's not a sweet rosé by any means. Juicy, fruity, but with a little bit of a cheeky edge to it, and the flavour lingers because it's quite high alcohol, and you can get the alcohol taste in the finish because there's a warming sensation in your mouth, which is quite unusual because you're drinking a cold glass of rosé. So I think this is about 14%, yes, 14% alcohol, which is quite high for a rosé wine. I think some of this is coming from the wine is matured on the lees, which is the little bits and pieces of the yeast after the wine is fermenting. And I think that's giving this extra depth to the flavour. A lot of the summer style rosés would be fermented without any lees contact whatsoever. And even this has been aged only in steel, no traces of oak in here. Yeah. That is very nice. But have your expectations ready for it. This is like a mellow rosé. It's not a very light, gentle Provence rosé. It's mellow, and I think this is a perfect rosé for a red wine drinker who finds the lighter style of rosés to be insipid. There's a little bit more to this one. Okay, so now we're going to stay in France, and we're actually staying in the general area. So Tavel is this tiny little appellation in the Rhône, and there's another area called Vaucluse, you can see it here, which is the general area around the south of France. So it includes the Rhône Valley, Châteauneuf-du-Pape, Tavel, all these general regions, and we're going to a wine called Le Sentier Dans Les Vignes. So this is, now we're getting into red, so this is Grenache, and here we've got 80% Grenache. Now, like I said, Grenache loves blending, and we've got 20% Syrah. So you're going to get more of the Grenache characteristics coming through here than there were in the rosé. So, ooh, that's lovely. It's very fruity. Rich, warm fruits in contrast to the rosé. And just wanted to mention something about this wine itself. It's very popular, and it does deliver a very fruity style. The name of the wine, Le Sentier Dans Les Vignes, it's the path through the vineyards. And if you look at the label, there's a little stylistic drawing of vegetation and everything, and there's a tree at the top. And you wonder, well, what's so special about the paths through the vineyards? Well, it's something very special because it's related for both the Le Sentier and the Tavel rosé. For that area in the south of France, Grenache is a very hardy grape. It loves heat. It's a sun worshipper, is the best way to describe it. And it can put up with a lot of wind, put up with drought, and it can put up with a lot of sun. It absorbs all the heat from the sun is that, excuse me here while I bring something in. This is a rather special rock. So this is the star of the vineyards. It's the rock star. Yeah. So in the vineyards, you'll find these round, flat, smooth rocks throughout the lines of the vines and in the paths. These stones, when the sun hits them, they heat up and they retain the heat. And it gradually releases it as it gets into the evening time. So the vines are exposed to plenty of light and plenty of heat. The Grenache is usually found in a bush vine, which means it grows like a small shrub by itself, not necessarily trained up on trellises like other grapes. It looks a bit like an old gnarly olive tree, if you've ever seen them. And these stones, they're called galets, are very particular to the vineyards of the southern Rhone, and especially where Grenache is grown. So there you go. If you find them around here during the day, you'll find they're really, really hot. So leave that one over there. So getting back here, we were on a lot more fruit forward than the rosé. Cherries, sweet, and there's an aroma of cut wood. It's like if you're cutting firewood, there's that slightly vegetal note. Fruity, but actually it's got a dry finish. Yeah. This wine is great value for money. I think it delivers really well. It's got just the right balance of fruit and a little tannin. It's more fruity than the rosé, and that's because of the higher proportion of the Grenache. So the Grenache is throwing all the juicy fruits at us, and the Shiraz is giving us that little savoury finish in the note. So let's move on. Now we're going to Australia. So we're going down to South Australia into a place called Barossa, which is very well known for Shiraz, which came from France down to the Barossa. And it did so well down there, the winemakers were like, okay, what else can we take from France? Because we know the climate works. If the grapes work in the south of France, they work for us down here. So sure enough, Grenache is now widely planted in the south of France, and especially in these blends. So you'll often find a wine called GSM, which is Grenache, Shiraz, Mourvèdre, another import from the south of France. So our one here is an SGT, which is Shiraz, of which in this bottle there is about 50% Shiraz, Grenache, which is about 40%, and 10% of a grape called Touriga Nacional, which is actually a Portuguese grape. So our winery here is St. Hallett, and St. Hallett is in the middle of the Barossa, in fantastic red wine country. Now the founders of St. Hallett, the winery itself was founded in 1944-46, something like that, by the Lindner and McLean family. And if you look at the label, you can see that little stylistic picture there is an L and an M of the Lindner and McLean. The Lindners originally came from Poland back in the 18th century. So like a lot of the winemakers in Australia, they were immigrants from Europe. So here then we're getting back into the blend again. Now this has got 40% Grenache. So let's see how it is. Ooh, lovely deep red colour. It's actually dark. You can't see through the glass. You can't see it at the other end. Yeah, it's darker in colour than the Sentier. So how are we on the nose? We've got red fruits, which is coming from the Grenache, but we've also got a bit of savoury spice, savoury backbone. Yeah, I think we really need to taste this. Wow, juicy. After tasting, sometimes you might pick up a different aroma if you go back to smell it again. I thought so. On the palate, there's lovely juicy fruits. They're much rounder and sweeter than the rosé. And I think some of this has been helped by having more Shiraz in here as well. But the Shiraz gives it body all around. You've got juicy fruits from the Grenache, and Touriga is giving hints of nutmeg and mace. So if you know your spices, the nutmeg is literally like a nut, and mace is that little feathery coating around it. Think a bit of Christmas cakes, Christmas puddings, baking spice, that kind of sensation. There is a little coming up in the nose, but definitely in the finish. St. Hallett have called this wine the gamekeeper, because the gamekeeper in real life looks after the land and manages the game, be it pheasant, fowl, salmon, whatever, and to keep the land regenerated and moving on. In the same way that St. Hallett look after the vineyards and manage them sustainably so that they get the best out of each vine. This is a lovely blend. The wines are actually vinified separately, and then the proportion changes each year according to where they want the taste to develop. So this is the 17 vintage. This is drinking so well now, but I think you could actually keep it a little bit longer as well. So, 3 quite different styles of wine. And considering that they've all got Grenache at their heart, it's quite interesting. So what can we have with them? I think if we look at some pasta dishes, I think our Tavel rosé is quite food friendly. And actually the vineyard here is called l'Elegantaire, which is rose hips, which are actually now used as part of vitamin C medicines. So it's got its origins in nutrition and food. I think this would go very well with like a carbonara pasta dish. You've got rich cream, pancetta. It's quite rich and luscious, and I think that the dryness of the rosé would just cut through that nicely. Going to the Sentier, I think this has got such a lovely little savoury finish. I think that'd be lovely with the ragu sauce. So your base is tomatoes, but you have lots of mushrooms, carrots, and other vegetables all mixed in, quite rich as well. Oh, I think that would work really well with that. And then St. Hallett, I think it's so fresh and juicy that I think it could go with a pomodoro, plain tomato sauce, but herb it up. Lots of Italian herbs, some sage, some basil, a little bit of oregano, And yeah, I think a little bit of garlic in there as well. Simmer it all up, toss it in your pasta, and a good shaving of parmesan on top. And I think the juiciness of that would just sit so well with the tomato base. So there you are. There's a little introduction to Grenache. You'll often find it used as a blend in other wines, so I hope you enjoy discovering it more. We'll be back next week, and we'll be exploring some white wines actually, so watch out for news on that. And just to remind you, tomorrow on the Facebook page we'll be posting the winner of our competition last week. So when we did Toasted Head, I had asked you to suggest a name for the bear on the label who looked rather grumpy and was breathing fire. So tomorrow, if you want to watch the video again, you're welcome to join in the competition. Just post your answer underneath, and tomorrow by noon we'll post the winner and they'll have a set of Toasted Head for themselves. So that's Grenache for tonight. Until next week, a bientôt.